In the tapestry of American history, few threads are woven as intricately and influentially as that of Martin Van Buren. Born in the tranquil village of Kinderhook, New York, Van Buren's journey from a modest upbringing to the pinnacle of American political power exemplifies not only the adaptability and ambition necessary for leadership, but also the profound impact of a single individual on the formation of a nation's enduring political institutions. Martin Van Buren, shaping a nation from Kinderhook roots to presidential heights, seeks to unravel the complexities behind one of the nation's most enigmatic founding fathers of democracy. This book follows Van Buren's path, from the son of Dutch immigrants working in the fields of Kinderhook, through his formative years as a lawyer, to the establishment of the Democratic Party, and ultimately, his tenure as the 8th President of the United States. Each chapter explores a distinct turning point in his life, providing not just a narrative of events, but an exploration into the persistent drive and calculated intellect that set Van Buren apart in the fiercely competitive political landscape of early America. Van Buren's story is, at its core, a testament to the relentless pursuit of ideals amidst adversity and change. His childhood, in a household shaped by colonial traditions and the echoes of the revolutionary spirit, built the foundation for an unwavering work ethic and a keen sense of pragmatism. As a lawyer, Van Buren honed his rhetoric and negotiation skills, preparing him for the intricate dance of political alliances that defined his career. Navigating the turbulent waters of New York's political factions, Van Buren emerged as both a unifier and a strategist, orchestrating the rise of the Albany Regency and laying the groundwork for a national party system. Moreover, Van Buren exemplified the art of political coalition building, leveraging friendships, most notably with Andrew Jackson, to consolidate power and steer the young nation through cycles of transition. His legacy as the architect of the Democratic Party is not just an account of one man's aspirations, but a blueprint for the development of mass political participation in America. This book invites readers to delve into Van Buren's formative experiences and seminal achievements, revealing how his personal background, strategic alliances, and steadfast vision for America helped shape the structure and soul of a nation. From the historic election of 1836 to the intricate workings of the vice presidency, each section brings us closer to understanding the enduring significance of Van Buren's contributions. The journey from humble roots to presidential heights was neither linear nor assured. It was carved from ambition, intellect, and an unwavering belief in democratic principles. As you turn the pages, you will observe not just a chronicle of political milestones, but the emergence of an American legacy. Chapter 1. Humble Beginnings. Kinderhook Roots. The verdant fields and gentle slopes of Kinderhook, New York, set the stage for the unassuming birth of Martin Van Buren, born on December 5, 1782, into a household bustling with the traditions of Dutch heritage. Van Buren's entry into the world was marked not by privilege, but by modest means and the values of resilience and community. His father, Abraham Van Buren, operated a small tavern that doubled as a social hub for townsfolk and travelers alike, while his mother, Maria Hose Van Buren, instilled in him a reverence for hard work and familial loyalty. Kinderhook itself was a quiet village, comprised mostly of farmers and merchant families, clinging to the remnants of colonial customs. The American Revolution had left its stamp, and the whisperings of independence lingered in every conversation that passed through the Van Buren Tavern. Within this environment, Martin absorbed not only the Dutch language and traditions, but also the dynamic spirit of change that permeated post-revolutionary America. From an early age, he witnessed the discussions of war veterans and political enthusiasts, sparking a curiosity that would become his lifelong companion. Education for a boy of Martin's circumstances was neither formal nor uninterrupted. Rather, it was an accumulation of lessons gleaned from community elders, moments stolen at the local schoolhouse, and long hours of self-driven study. Under the guidance of his parents, he learned the principles of thrift and perseverance. His early exposure to legal disputes, many settled at his father's inn over tankards of ale, honed his ability to listen, analyze, and arbitrate. Young Martin soon revealed a predilection for resolving conflicts and navigating the nuances of argument, foreshadowing his future as a skilled negotiator and advocate. The Van Buren family's economic standing was modest, yet their connections proved invaluable. Abraham's Tavern attracted politicians, lawyers, and farmers, creating an informal network of influence that Martin would later draw upon in his political career. The relationships fostered over shared meals and civic debate offered a practical education in leadership and the art of coalition building. Here, Martin learned that progress was often a matter of consensus rather than conquest, a lesson that would resonate throughout his work as a statesman. But life in Kinderhook was not without its challenges. The Van Burens faced the economic uncertainties of nation-building, harsh winters, and the burdens of sustaining their livelihood. Martin witnessed firsthand the struggles of his neighbors, their hopes and dreams entangled with the unpredictable tides of early American commerce and agriculture. These collective experiences shaped his understanding of the democratic ideal, not as an abstract principle, but as a lived reality that affected the daily lives of ordinary citizens. As Van Buren grew, his aspirations expanded beyond the boundaries of Kinderhook. Encouraged by family and mentors, he pursued legal studies, recognizing that a career in law offered not just financial stability, but an avenue for advocacy and influence. At age 14, Martin apprenticed with Francis Sylvester, a prominent lawyer in neighboring Hudson. The rigors of legal training were demanding, requiring a mastery of statutes, procedures, and the subtleties of persuasion. Yet Van Buren thrived, applying the resilience and analytical skills forged in his youth to the complex landscape of early American jurisprudence. The path from Kinderhook to the halls of power was not direct, but it was deliberate. Martin Van Buren's early life provided the foundation upon which he built his future. Each hardship surmounted became a lesson in leadership, and each relationship nurtured a stepping stone toward public service. Kinderhook was not simply a place of origin, it was a crucible, shaping his character and commitment to the principles of representation and equality. The sense of belonging and responsibility instilled in those formative years remained a guiding force as Van Buren ventured into the broader arenas of law and politics. He carried with him the values of his upbringing: humility, pragmatism, and a deep respect for the common citizen. In every subsequent challenge, the lessons of Kinderhook were evident, marking Van Buren as a man both of and for the people. So it was in those quiet fields and bustling taverns that the future architect of the Democratic Party found his roots. The echoes of Kinderhook's conversations and struggles reverberated throughout Van Buren's career, enriching his understanding of governance and propelling him toward a life devoted to public service. His journey, anchored in the soil of his homeland, would not only transform his destiny, but also reshape the contours of American democracy. Chapter 2. The Young Lawyer. Ambition in Early America. As Martin Van Buren transitioned from rural roots to the realm of jurisprudence, his path was marked by ambition, adaptability, and a keen intellect. The discipline required for legal study in the late 18th and early 19th centuries was considerable. Law was not simply a matter of intellectual mastery, but also of social navigation and resourcefulness. His apprenticeship under Francis Sylvester in Hudson brought Van Buren into close contact with the mechanisms of American legal practice. Sylvester, a respected figure, recognized Martin's sharp mind, encouraging him to engage deeply with precedent, argumentation, and the subtle art of persuasion. While the law curriculum then was informal, much of Van Buren's education consisted of reading legal treatises, Blackstone's commentaries chief among them, and observing court proceedings. This environment sharpened his analytical abilities, and he quickly distinguished himself among his peers by his dexterity in both scholarship and debate. The legal profession at this time was intimately entwined with politics and public life. Small-town lawyers frequently doubled as community leaders, mediators in land disputes, and de facto public servants. Martin understood that mastery of the law could lead not only to personal advancement, but could serve as a gateway to broader influence. He assiduously cultivated relationships with clients and local officials, gaining a reputation for fairness and efficacy. By his late teens, Van Buren had begun to build his own legal practice, initially in partnership with his half-brother, Joseph Van Allen. The practice drew clients from every echelon of Hudson Valley society, from farmers seeking arbitration over property lines to merchants embroiled in commercial disagreements. Martin's ability to listen, learned in his father's tavern, proved invaluable, setting him apart from lawyers who favored rigid formality over pragmatic problem-solving. Van Buren did not isolate himself from the social currents swirling through the region. The early republic was a time of great transformation, and New York in particular was a hotbed of legal and political activity. The rise of canal systems, the growth of commerce, and waves of immigration generated conflicts and opportunities. Van Buren, perceptive and adaptable, tracked these changes closely, integrating emerging legal concepts into his practice and aligning himself with up-and-coming civic leaders. Ambition was a force that propelled Martin forward, but it was tempered by pragmatism. He was not content with mere professional success. He sensed that the American legal and political systems were on the cusp of evolution. Instead of viewing the law as static, Van Buren championed its malleability, advocating for procedures that reflected both community standards and broader democratic values. He engaged in public debate, contributing articles to local newspapers and participating in civic gatherings, where he articulated the importance of legal access and equitable representation. His marriage to Hannah Hose in 1807, his childhood sweetheart and distant cousin, stabilized his personal life, providing both companionship and support as he faced the demands of professional advancement. The couple's household was modest but grounded in empathy, a reflection of the Kinderhook ethos that continued to guide Van Buren's choices. His first formal political position arose in 1803, when Van Buren was appointed as Kinderhook's surrogate, a judicial office responsible for overseeing wills and estate cases. Here, he demonstrated his commitment to impartiality and fairness, earning respect among both colleagues and constituents. The surrogate's office brought Van Buren into closer contact with the intricacies of local government and the intersection of law with civic policy. Throughout this period, Van Buren's approach to legal practice was methodical and thoughtful. He believed that the law should serve the people, reflecting not just abstract doctrine, but tangible realities. As he moved from case to case, courtroom to courtroom, he refined the skills that would eventually make him a formidable presence in both legal and political spheres. His success as a lawyer lay not only in technical proficiency, but in the ability to recognize the shifting dynamics of early American society. The law, Van Buren argued, was a living instrument, shaped by the values and ambitions of those it governed. He sought to bridge gaps between tradition and innovation, balancing the wisdom of the past with the possibilities of the future. It was in this crucible that Martin Van Buren forged the qualities of leadership and advocacy that would define his later career. His journey from Kinderhook's pastoral calm to the bustling courtrooms of Hudson was not just one of personal growth, but of engagement with the broader currents of change. Van Buren's ambition as a young lawyer, grounded in empathy, sharpened by intellect and disciplined by experience, set the stage for his emergence as a new voice in American politics. Chapter 3: Entering Politics: The Rise of a New Voice. The transition from legal practice to political engagement was a natural evolution for Martin Van Buren. As a lawyer, he had cultivated the art of negotiation and rhetoric. As a citizen, he was increasingly aware of the implications of policy and governance. The early 19th century was marked by fiscal upheaval, intense party rivalry, and the growth of popular democracy. Into this milieu, Van Buren injected a freshness of perspective that resonated with a changing electorate. Van Buren's entree into politics began with his involvement in local New York politics. His legal standing provided access to the region's most influential circles, and by 1812 he was elected to the New York State Senate. The Senate was a forum for spirited debate, with representatives championing competing interests: urban development, rural agriculture, and mercantile expansion. Van Buren's skill lay in his ability to mediate these interests, crafting coalitions that prioritized stability and long-term progress. His early tenure coincided with the War of 1812, a period of uncertainty that tested the mettle of politicians nationwide. Van Buren advocated for measures that balanced national security with local autonomy, earning a reputation as both a pragmatist and a visionary. He opposed excess government spending, championed sound fiscal policy, and supported reforms that expanded the rights and responsibilities of ordinary citizens. At the same time, Van Buren demonstrated a keen understanding of political alliances. He joined forces with like-minded reformers, leveraging relationships built during his years in legal practice and community service. Van Buren recognized that successful statesmanship required more than solitary brilliance. It was the work of many, guided by strategic consensus. Thus began his lifelong commitment to party building and organizational discipline. In 1815, Van Buren was appointed New York's Attorney General, a post that allowed him to exert influence over state administration and legal precedent. As Attorney General, he guided reforms in court procedure and emphasized equal treatment before the law. The position deepened his exposure to the complexities of government, making him acutely aware of the interplay between executive authority and legislative oversight. Tensions ran high in New York during this period as competing factions, the Bucktails Federalists and Clintonians, vied for supremacy. Van Buren's leadership of the Bucktail faction placed him at the forefront of the struggle for party reform. He championed the principle of rotation in office, sought to democratize public appointments, and resisted the encroachment of entrenched elites. Van Buren's rise was propelled not by fiery oratory, but by quiet, persistent advocacy. He built trust among constituents, advanced practical initiatives, and avoided unnecessary partisanship. His rationale was simple. Politics required not just vision, but endurance and adaptability. He understood that the nation was in transition, moving steadily toward a more inclusive democracy. His efforts were vindicated in the creation of durable party organizations. Van Buren's ability to navigate internal disputes and external challenges cemented his role as a central figure in New York politics. He accrued influence not just through formal office, but through the informal networks that would eventually underpin the Albany Regency. Van Buren's early political career was marked by a blend of ambition and restraint. He refrained from overreach, preferring incremental progress to radical upheaval. Yet his commitment to expanding participation, reforming institutions, and safeguarding the interests of common Americans distinguished him as a leader attuned to the changing demands of national life. The rise of Martin Van Buren as a political Voice was not sudden, but the product of years of preparation, collaboration, and strategic thinking. His experiences as a lawyer and surrogate, his work in the state senate and as attorney general, and his leadership in party formation collectively forged a model of statesmanship grounded in principle and pragmatism. From the local circuits of Hinderhook to the legislative chambers of New York, Van Buren's ascent was characterized by empathy, intellect, and a tireless pursuit of consensus. His emergence marked the beginning of a new era in American politics, one in which disciplined party organization and strategic alliances would shape the destiny of the Republic. Chapter 4: Building Alliances, the Albany Regency. The concept of alliance building lies at the heart of Martin Van Buren's political philosophy. His early recognition that effective governance relied upon durable coalitions led him to orchestrate one of the most powerful political organizations in 19th century America, the Albany Regency, founded in the early 1820s. The Regency was more than a political faction. It was an apparatus, an engine of coordination and influence that extended throughout New York and eventually the nation. Van Buren, along with a cadre of trusted associates, Benjamin Butler, Simeon DeWitt, and William L. Marcy among them, engineered a network capable of controlling nominations, shaping policy, and delivering votes. The origins of the Regency can be traced to Van Buren's response to the fragmentation of New York's political culture. Factions such as the Clintonians, Federalists, and Bucktails were locked in perpetual conflict, undermining the effectiveness of government. Van Buren's solution was strategic: unify like-minded reformers under a disciplined banner, create systematic channels of communication, and institute a rotation of office that curtailed the influence of entrenched elites. This approach reflected Van Buren's legal sensibilities. Every action measured, rights and demands balanced, outcomes negotiated. The Regency's principles were built on loyalty, consensus, and operational secrecy. Monthly meetings in Albany became legendary for their rigor and organization, as Van Buren and his colleagues debated policy, selected candidates, and forged strategies for statewide campaigns. Van Buren's quiet leadership was essential. He rarely sought the limelight, preferring to work behind the scenes. His ability to listen, arbitrate disputes, and identify emerging talent endowed the Regency with resilience and adaptability. The organization promoted individuals based on merit, commitment, and loyalty, thereby cultivating a cadre of dedicated public servants. Under Van Buren's guidance, the Regency succeeded in democratizing New York's political process. Patronage was not abandoned, but rationalized. Appointments were distributed to those who demonstrated competence and fidelity to the collective cause. The system minimized corruption by centralizing accountability, rewarding discipline and service over personal ambition. The Regency became a model for political parties nationwide. It demonstrated the importance of organization, discipline, and communication in navigating the complexity of American democracy. It also introduced new mechanisms for public participation, including conventions, popular primaries, and robust voter outreach programs. Van Buren's legacy as a coalition builder was apparent in the Regency's longevity. Despite facing intense opposition from rival politicians, hostile newspapers, and skeptical citizens, the Regency endured for decades. Its influence extended beyond New York, inspiring the formation of national party organizations that adopted its methodologies. Central to Van Buren's success was his respect for compromise. He understood that alliances were often fragile, requiring continual negotiation and adjustment. The Regency's internal cohesion was secured by a shared commitment to incremental reform and mutual support. The organization's capacity to absorb dissent and adapt to changing conditions was a testament to Van Buren's pragmatic vision. Yet, the Regency faced criticism. Some accused Van Buren of machine politics, of substituting principle for expediency. Van Buren responded by emphasizing the role of organization in safeguarding democracy. Without structure, he argued, political movements collapsed into chaos. Discipline was not an end in itself, but a means of sustaining participation and advancing collective goals. The Regency's achievements were considerable. It ensured the election of sympathetic governors, expanded access to suffrage, and pioneered new policies in education and infrastructure. Van Buren's influence was felt in every corner of state administration, from county courthouses to the governor's mansion. Building alliances, Van Buren concluded, was the key to enduring political success. Through the Albany Regency, he demonstrated how unity, discipline, and strategy could overcome division, empower citizens, and reshape the future of a state, and ultimately, a nation. The Regency's legacy lived on in the institutions of the Democratic Party and the collective memory of American political history. Chapter 5. The Architect of the Democratic Party, Martin. Van Buren's elevation from small-town lawyer to a formidable political strategist marks one of the most transformative periods in American political evolution. His journey began in Kinderhook, where Dutch traditions and a tight-knit community imparted a sense of pragmatism and resourcefulness. These early influences would become cornerstones of his political philosophy, a belief in the power of organization, consensus, and adaptability. Van Buren's first major foray into politics was as a skilled attorney, but he quickly realized that the law was just one avenue to influence. True power lay in governance and party dynamics. By the end of the 1820s, America was at a crossroads. The Jeffersonian ideals of the earlier republic had given way to factionalism and regional competition, and there was a pressing need for a more cohesive, organized approach to government. Van Buren discerned that the future of governance would depend on the development of a robust, disciplined party machinery capable of mobilizing public opinion and shaping legislative priorities. His time in the New York Senate and subsequent role as the state's Attorney General offered Van Buren a laboratory for political experimentation. He began crafting what would later be known as the Albany Regency, a core group of allies who wielded unprecedented control over New York politics. This entity functioned not merely as a collection of like-minded individuals, but as a coordinated bureau responsible for nominations, appointments, and legislative agendas. Van Buren's genius lay in recognizing that political stability required institutional support. His vision was a party not just of personalities, but of principles and shared goals. The rise of the Democratic Party was inseparable from Van Buren's labor. He believed deeply in broad-based participation, advocating suffrage extension and procedural reforms that would empower ordinary citizens. At the same time, he was shrewd enough to realize that mass politics would flounder without discipline. Through his guidance, the party adopted clear platforms, held well-organized conventions, and fostered communication networks that would ensure unity across disparate regions. Yet, Van Buren was not without controversy. His methods, often seen as manipulative, invited criticism from opponents who accused him of fostering machine politics. Critics suggested that the regimented nature of party organization placed loyalty above merit and undermined individual liberty. However, Van Buren countered that a well-structured party was essential for advancing democratic governance and preventing the entrenchment of elites. His theoretical understanding of party dynamics set the foundation for modern American campaigning. Unlike previous generations who relied on informal alliances and local power brokers, Van Buren insisted on the necessity of national coherence. He worked tirelessly to knit together northern and southern interests, balancing the demands of slavery, economic development, and territorial expansion with the imperative of unity. This meant making concessions and hard choices, but it also allowed the Democratic Party to become the nation's dominant political force for decades to come. By the close of the 1820s, Van Buren's efforts culminated in the ascent of Andrew Jackson, whose presidency embodied many of the ideas and procedures Van Buren had championed. Jackson's administration was notable for its reliance on party machinery, its embrace of popular mobilization, and its resistance to aristocratic privilege, all hallmarks of Van Buren's vision. As Jackson's close confidant and advisor, Van Buren ensured that the Democratic Party would not merely be an electoral vehicle, but a governing institution with enduring influence. This chapter, therefore, sets the stage for understanding Van Buren's legacy as the founding architect of the Democratic Party. His innovations in party organization, his commitment to broad-based participation, and his deft mediation of sectional tensions transformed American politics from a loose array of factions into a disciplined, ideologically driven contest. The instruments Van Buren pioneered, conventions, platforms, and patronage, not only shaped the Democratic Party but also became templates for all subsequent American political life. Van Buren's story as the architect of the Democratic Party is ultimately a tale of vision, endurance, and adaptation. He saw in the political landscape the seeds of both chaos and possibility, and through organization, ingenuity, and sheer will, he cultivated a system capable of harnessing the aspirations of millions. The Democratic Party, as it emerged under his stewardship, was more than a coalition. It was a vehicle for the democratic experiment itself, and its continuing evolution stands as a tribute to Van Buren's indelible mark upon the nation. Chapter 6: The Jackson Connection, Friendship and Strategy. Within the tapestry of early American political history, few alliances have been as consequential as that between Martin Van Buren and Andrew Jackson. Their partnership transcended mere political convenience, evolving into a profound bond shaped by complementary ambitions, mutual respect, and a shared vision for the future of the Republic. Van Buren's role in fostering, sustaining, and leveraging this relationship provides a window into the dynamics of power, strategy, and loyalty at the highest echelons of governance. The mid-1820s were marked by the emergence of Andrew Jackson as a charismatic leader capable of inspiring both adulation and controversy. Van Buren recognized in Jackson a figure whose appeal derived from authentic populism and a reputation for incorruptible resolve. Jackson's military exploits, most notably at the Battle of New Orleans, had earned him the respect of the people. But Van Buren saw beyond the legend. He discerned the potential for Jackson to become the standard-bearer of an organized, ideologically driven political movement. Their initial interactions were typified by cautious collaboration. Van Buren, always the calculative strategist, offered advice and support while observing Jackson's ability to navigate the tempestuous waters of national politics. Van Buren's admiration for Jackson was rooted not only in his personal virtues, but in his capacity to inspire loyalty among the masses. Yet he also recognized the necessity of guiding Jackson's energies within the disciplined framework of party organization. This balance between Jackson's spontaneity and Van Buren's structure became the defining feature of their partnership. The friendship deepened throughout Jackson's ascendancy to the presidency. Van Buren's diplomatic skills allowed him to mediate internal disputes within the Democratic Party, ensuring that Jackson's populist message did not fracture under the weight of sectional and ideological differences. Van Buren's contributions to the Jackson administration were subtle but impactful. He provided counsel on cabinet appointments, legislative initiatives, and public messaging. Jackson, relying on Van Buren's organizational prowess, bestowed upon him immense trust, famously referring to him as "my right arm." The strategic component of their relationship reached its zenith during Jackson's struggle against entrenched interests. The battle over the Bank of the United States tested the cohesion of the Democratic coalition, pitting Jacksonian populism against the influence of pro-bank elites. Van Buren orchestrated alliances, managed political fallout, and devised legislative tactics that allowed the administration to maintain unity and flexibility. His ability to translate Jackson's vision into an actionable strategy not only preserved the president's popularity but also advanced the broader goals of the Democratic Party. Perhaps most illustrative of their dynamic was Van Buren's selection as Jackson's successor. In 1832, amidst growing factionalism and uncertainty, Jackson announced his unequivocal support for Van Buren, declaring him the only candidate capable of safeguarding the administration's legacy. The endorsement was not mere patronage, it was the culmination of years of mutual dependence and collaboration. Van Buren's nomination as vice president reflected Jackson's faith in his judgment, integrity, and commitment to the cause. Their bond was not immune to challenge. Jackson's independence and Van Buren's penchant for calculation sometimes led to disagreement, particularly in matters of appointments and policy priorities. However, these divergences were invariably resolved through negotiation and compromise, underscoring the resilience of their partnership. Van Buren's willingness to subordinate personal ambition to Jackson's leadership testifies to his understanding of the greater stakes involved, the shaping of an enduring political movement. The Jackson connection was more than the sum of its parts. It was a crucible in which the foundations of modern American politics were formed. Through friendship and strategy, Van Buren helped channel Jackson's energy into lasting institutional achievements, such as the expansion of executive power, the championing of popular democracy, and the consolidation of party discipline. Their alliance affirmed the symbiotic relationship between principle and pragmatism, charisma and organization. As Van Buren transitioned from vice president to presidential candidate, he did so with the endorsement and guidance of a mentor who had become a friend. The Jackson connection thus stands as a testament to the power of genuine alliance in advancing national progress. It demonstrates the importance of combining vision with strategy, inspiration with discipline, a lesson indispensable not only to their era, but to all who seek to lead. Chapter 7: The Vice Presidency, a Nation in Transition. Martin Van Buren's tenure as vice president unfolded during one of the most transformative periods in the history of the United States, bearing witness to an era of political realignment, regional discord, and burgeoning national identity. His elevation to the vice presidency was not merely a reward for loyalty or a stepping stone to the presidency. Rather, it was a critical juncture at which the evolving American political system confronted the challenges and possibilities of a nation in flux. Van Buren assumed the office of vice president in 1833, following a tense and closely contested election cycle. His candidacy had been shaped by the internal dynamics of the Democratic Party, Jackson's personal endorsement, and the broader shift toward popular mobilization in national politics. Unlike his predecessors, who often viewed the vice presidency as a ceremonial role, Van Buren approached the position with active engagement and strategic intent, recognizing its potential as both a platform for influence and a vantage point for national observation. The political climate at the time of Van Buren's vice presidency was characterized by intense sectionalism. The nullification crisis in South Carolina, driven by disputes over tariffs and state sovereignty, exemplified the deepening rifts between North and South. Van Buren's role in these disputes was indirect yet profound. He worked assiduously behind the scenes to maintain party unity and ensure that the administration's responses balanced firmness with conciliation. His mastery of political nuance allowed him to support Jackson's decisive action against nullification while tempering the rhetoric to avoid inflaming regional hostilities. Van Buren's influence was also evident in the realm of administrative reform. He advocated for a merit-based approach to appointments, emphasizing competence and loyalty to the party's principles. This was part of his broader effort to professionalize government service and curb the excesses of patronage that had plagued earlier administrations. Van Buren's reforms, though controversial, reflected his enduring belief in organization and accountability, a philosophy that would echo throughout his own presidency. The vice presidency afforded Van Buren unique opportunities for observation and reflection. He traveled extensively, meeting with citizens, local officials, and party operatives to gauge public sentiment and identify emerging issues. His attentive listening and pragmatic approach enabled him to anticipate policy challenges before they erupted into crisis. In many respects, Van Buren's tenure as vice president was a period of apprenticeship, during which he refined his understanding of executive leadership and deepened his commitment to the principles of democratization and institutional stability. Van Buren's relationship with Jackson during these years was both complementary and collaborative. As the trusted confidant of an often embattled president, he provided counsel on critical decisions and acted as a conduit between the administration and the broader party apparatus. Jackson's reliance on Van Buren's judgment was especially pronounced during moments of uncertainty, whether in negotiating with foreign powers, managing economic tensions, or navigating internal dissent. One of the most significant initiatives of Van Buren's vice presidency was his support for the administration's policies regarding Native American removal. While he shared Jackson's commitment to Western expansion, Van Buren recognized the political and humanitarian complexities of forced relocation. His efforts to ensure the legality and administrative efficiency of the removal process reflected a pragmatic, if controversial, approach to governance, one that balanced the imperatives of national growth with the requirements of law. Van Buren also participated in shaping foreign policy, particularly in dealings with Great Britain and Latin American nations. He advocated for careful diplomacy and the avoidance of entanglements that could jeopardize America's security or economic interests. His approach to international affairs during the vice presidency was marked by caution, strategic calculation, and an unwavering focus on national sovereignty. The vice presidency served as both a crucible and a proving ground for Van Buren. It was here that he honed his skills of negotiation, learned the intricacies of executive authority, and prepared for the immense responsibilities that lay ahead. By the time his term concluded, Van Buren had established himself as not only a consummate party strategist, but also a leader capable of guiding the nation through uncertain times. The period of transition that accompanied Van Buren's vice presidency laid the foundation for the transformative years that followed. It was a time of both continuity and change, of consolidation and adaptation. Through perseverance, ingenuity, and a steadfast commitment to the values of popular democracy, Van Buren navigated the challenges of an era marked by volatility, a feat that would prove invaluable in his subsequent role as president. Chapter 8. The Election of 1836, a Triumph of Tactics. The election of 1836 stands as a landmark in American political history, not merely for its outcome, but for the elaborate tactics and strategic maneuvers that ensured Martin Van Buren's ascent to the presidency. This chapter examines the complexities and intricacies of the campaign, illuminating the political maneuvers that transformed Van Buren from Jackson's loyal vice president into the nation's chief executive. Unlike previous elections, the contest of 1836 unfolded against a backdrop of mounting division and expanding political participation. The country was in the throes of demographic and economic changes, with new states joining the Union and old allegiances fragmenting. Van Buren, acutely aware of these shifts, devised a campaign strategy that exploited both the strengths of the Democratic Party and the weaknesses of its competitors. The opposition, largely fragmented between Whigs, national Republicans, and regional interests, failed to present a unified front. Recognizing this, Van Buren and his allies anticipated that a divided opposition would dilute votes and facilitate a democratic victory. It was this calculated exploitation of rival discord that became the central tactical achievement of the election. Van Buren's campaign was characterized by careful cultivation of party identity. He insisted on the adoption of distinct platforms, regular conventions, and the mobilization of grassroots support. The Democratic Party's organizational apparatus, honed in the Albany Regency and refined on the national stage, was deployed with unprecedented efficiency. Van Buren's strategists emphasized issues of popular sovereignty, expansion, and economic growth, seeking to align the party's message with the aspirations of ordinary Americans. One of Van Buren's most innovative tactics was the exploitation of regional voting patterns. Anticipating that opposition candidates would siphon off votes in New England and the South, Van Buren focused his efforts on the West and Mid-Atlantic states, where Democratic unity was strongest. He cultivated alliances with local leaders, orchestrated rallies, and deployed surrogates to reinforce the message of continuity from Jackson's administration. The role of Jackson's endorsement cannot be overstated. Jackson's popularity and moral authority lent Van Buren both credibility and momentum. Van Buren skillfully positioned himself as the legitimate heir to Jacksonian democracy, promising to preserve the achievements and ethos of his predecessor. The campaign utilized imagery, speeches, and editorials to reinforce the idea of seamless succession, assuaging fears of radical change or instability. Yet, the election was not without its obstacles. Van Buren faced criticism for his association with the policies of Native American removal and the use of patronage. The Whigs mounted vigorous attacks, attempting to paint Van Buren as a manipulative political magician. These charges, though damaging, were met with systematic rebuttal by Democratic operatives, who countered with testimonies to Van Buren's integrity and record of public service. As election day approached, Van Buren and his team redoubled their efforts to solidify party unity. They dispatched emissaries to wavering states, negotiated with local factions, and preempted defections with promises of appointments and patronage. The machinery of the Democratic Party operated at full throttle. Newspapers, public meetings, and correspondence networks all contributed to a relentless campaign for votes. The result was a narrow but decisive victory. Van Buren secured 170 electoral votes against multiple opponents, each representing splintered opposition. His triumph was, above all, a testament to the power of organization, discipline, and tactical acumen. The fact that Van Buren was able to succeed Jackson without a major crisis or schism speaks to the effectiveness of his strategy and the maturity of the Democratic Party as a political force. Van Buren entered office with both the promise and challenge of continuity. The tactics and innovations of the 1836 campaign had brought him to power. But the new president was immediately confronted with the realities of governing a nation beset by economic, regional, and ideological division. The triumph of tactics was, in this sense, both an achievement and a prelude, a signal of Van Buren's capacity for leadership and a reminder of the complexities that awaited him. With the election behind him, Van Buren prepared to face a series of unprecedented challenges. The skills he had demonstrated in securing the presidency, organization, strategy, and adaptability would now be tested in the crucible of executive governance. The election of 1836 thus stands as both a culmination of tactical prowess and the beginning of Van Buren's most demanding chapter. Chapter 9. The Panic of 1837, Trials of a New President. Martin Van Buren's presidential inauguration in March 1837 was a moment rife with both anticipation and unseen winds of trouble. As he stood at the helm of the United States, Van Buren inherited a nation lodged in the throes of economic expansion, yet perilously unsteady in its foundations. The optimism that had flourished under Andrew Jackson's final years was about to be shattered. The Panic of 1837 erupted with startling swiftness, its origins rooted in speculative excess, successive failures of banks, and international financial strains. The previous administration's policies, particularly Jackson's dismantling of the Second Bank of the United States and the issuance of the Specie Circular, had destabilized the complex web of American finance. The requirement that government lands be purchased with gold or silver rather than paper money precipitated a dangerous constriction of credit. As the economic tide turned, banks suspended specie payments, businesses collapsed, and unemployment surged. The trust that held the nation's economy together dissipated almost overnight. Van Buren, just months into his presidency, was left to answer the clamoring calls of citizens reeling from financial disaster. Van Buren's response was measured but controversial. He convened a special session of Congress in September 1837, seeking to address the crisis with careful deliberation. Rather than inject government directly into the economy, Van Buren held steadfast to the principle of limited federal intervention, believing that recovery required patience and discipline, not panic-driven legislative largesse. His plan was guided by a faith in the self-correcting nature of markets, but this philosophy faced fierce opposition. Critics lambasted his apparent inaction. Whigs and disenchanted Democrats alike demanded more vigorous relief. Within his cabinet and congressional allies, Van Buren sought understanding and partnership. The president leaned on his legal background and years of political negotiation, striving to forge a consensus without capitulating to expediency. Yet the bitterness of public suffering translated into a mounting wave of dissent. Breadlines lengthened, farmers abandoned failing lands, urban unrest grew more pronounced. The polity of the republic appeared fragile. Van Buren's image suffered considerably during this period. Portraits of Van Ruin, a derisive nickname coined by his adversaries, spread through newspaper caricatures and street ballads. Political opponents seized upon every misstep, amplifying the narrative of a president out of touch with his people's needs. Despite the bleakness, Van Buren persistently championed the creation of an independent treasury, arguing that divorcing government finances from private banking interests would restore stability. While the legislation would take years to pass, its debate defined Van Buren's administration and set the stage for lasting reform. As the chapter closes, Van Buren emerges as a figure deeply tested by circumstance. The Panic of 1837 was not merely an economic crisis, it was an existential challenge, demanding leadership, vision, and a remarkable degree of composure. It signaled the beginning of a tenure marked by controversy, courage, and the unrelenting scrutiny of a nation in turmoil. Chapter 10: Navigating Economic Turmoil, Leadership Under Pressure. The aftermath of the Panic of 1837 threw Martin Van Buren into the crucible of presidential leadership. Economic instability became the defining feature of his administration, requiring a steady hand and a strategic mind capable of managing the competing interests of a divided country. Van Buren was compelled to navigate terrain fraught with uncertainty, balancing orthodox convictions against the desperate pleadings of those who sought bold intervention. Van Buren's approach to governance, shaped by the Jeffersonian belief in restrained government, translated into policies that rejected immediate relief through increased federal spending or the distribution of public funds. Instead, he advocated for the separation of government finances from commercial banks, a stance that in the short term disappointed many, but in the long term revealed a dedication to economic prudence. The president's cabinet meetings were marked by intense debate, as advisors argued the merits and dangers of federal direct action. Van Buren listened, deliberated, and ultimately chose stability over risk. The broader public, however, saw each day of economic stagnation as an indictment of his administration. Farm foreclosures, business bankruptcies, and the withering of public confidence in government underscored the urgency of the crisis. Popular newspapers and political assemblies gave voice to dissatisfaction, with the Whig Party gaining momentum through passionate rallies and biting critiques. Within Congress, Van Buren faced opposition that was not merely political but ideological. Southern states, reliant on cotton exports and disproportionately affected by falling commodity prices, pressed for federal support. Northern industrialists, their fortunes also in peril, demanded access to expanded credit and infrastructure investment. Van Buren's refusal to yield set the administration on a collision course with powerful economic interests. Yet Van Buren was not without allies. Loyal Democrats, especially those committed to the principles of hard money, rallied around the president's vision. The debate over intervention versus restraint was not merely academic, it was the battleground upon which the nation's financial future would be decided. Van Buren's leadership style reflected a lawyer's precision and a politician's pragmatism. He was not a man for grand gestures or fiery oratory, but for incremental improvement and careful stewardship. His correspondence reveals a man seeking compromise where possible, yet unwavering in his core convictions. To address the immediate suffering, his administration cautiously supported state-level initiatives. Van Buren encouraged states to create relief programs and reorganize local banks, insisting that the federal government should not supersede local efforts. This position did not assuage critics, but it laid the groundwork for constitutional clarity regarding the separation of powers. Ultimately, Van Buren's navigation of economic turmoil was marked by incremental recovery amid lingering hardship. Though the slow rebound frustrated many, history would render a more nuanced verdict on the wisdom of his decisions. The crisis revealed both the strengths and the limits of his presidency, testing the boundaries of his leadership and the durability of his ideals. Chapter 11. The Independent Treasury, a bold financial reform. In the wake of continued economic instability, Martin Van Buren set his sights on a transformative financial reform, the establishment of the Independent Treasury. The proposal, radical in its implications, sought to sever the entwined fortunes of federal government and private banking, a relationship that he believed had contributed significantly to the crisis that beset the nation. The concept of the independent treasury was rooted in Van Buren's enduring suspicion of concentrated financial power. The collapse of numerous state banks, compounded by the legacy of the bank war initiated under Jackson, had demonstrated the peril of allowing government funds to reside within private institutions susceptible to market shocks. Van Buren's plan was straightforward yet profound. Public monies would be kept exclusively in government vaults, managed by officials accountable only to the state. Introducing the reform to Congress in late 1837, Van Buren faced immediate resistance. Whigs denounced the measure, claiming it would deprive the economy of necessary liquidity and deepen the crisis. Even within his own party, skepticism festered. Some Democrats feared the reform would restrict credit and impair economic growth. Van Buren responded with a reasoned argument. The independent treasury would insulate government finances from the caprices of private enterprise, safeguarding the public interest above expediency. The legislative path was arduous. Year after year, the bill was tabled, debated, and rejected. Van Buren's persistence became legendary, a testament to his resolve and his willingness to challenge entrenched interests. While critics assailed him for delaying more immediate relief, Van Buren believed in the necessity of laying a foundation of sound financial practice for future generations. Public opinion was equally divided. Some saw the measure as a step backward, a withdrawal from the vibrancy of national commerce. Others, particularly the hard money advocates, recognized in the proposal a long overdue solution to the cycles of boom and bust that had afflicted the U.S. economy since its inception. After years of debate and revision, the independent treasury was finally enacted in 1840. Its passage marked both a vindication of Van Buren's principles and a pivotal shift in American financial policy. No longer would federal funds fuel speculative ventures in the hope of short-term gain. Instead, the Treasury system would operate independently, with its own facilities and offices, answerable only to public authority. The legacy of the independent Treasury extended far beyond Van Buren's presidency. While subsequent administrations would revise and occasionally suspend the system, the core concept endured, influencing debates over central banking and public finance through the 20th century. Van Buren's reform, born of crisis but shaped by conviction, stands today as one of his most significant contributions to American governance. In the context of his presidency, the independent Treasury was both an answer to the immediate suffering of the Panic of 1837 and a lasting framework for the stewardship of national wealth. It reflected Van Buren's loyal attention to structure and accountability, his dedication to the principle of separation of powers, and his faith in careful, deliberate reform over impetuous action. Chapter 12. Foreign Affairs and Domestic Challenges. Beyond the crucible of economic crisis, Martin Van Buren's presidency was marked by a complex tapestry of foreign and domestic challenges. As the nation reeled from internal distress, it found itself enmeshed in international disputes, the management of which would test both diplomatic acumen and political courage. One of the most immediate foreign affairs issues confronting Van Buren was the ongoing tension with Great Britain. The northeast border dispute, centered on Maine and New Brunswick, risked igniting an armed conflict. The so-called Aroostook War, triggered by competing timber interests and imprecise treaty lines, loomed dangerously in early 1839. Van Buren responded with cautious diplomacy, dispatching federal negotiators and urging Maine's militia to exercise restraint. Through dialogue and quiet pressure, he prevented the escalation of hostilities, setting the stage for a later, peaceful settlement under the Webster-Ashburton Treaty. Further south, Van Buren confronted the delicate question of Texas. The former Mexican territory had declared independence in 1836, and its annexation was championed by expansionists eager to extend American influence and slaveholding power. Van Buren saw the potential for international volatility, not only with Mexico, but also with Great Britain and France, who eyed the independence of Texas as a check on American expansion. Weighing the divisive issue, he elected not to pursue immediate annexation, believing that such a move would inflame sectional tension and destabilize foreign relations. This decision, though costly to his popularity among Southern Democrats, revealed his commitment to cautious, measured leadership. On the domestic front, Van Buren faced persistent unrest. The economic trials exacerbated labor strife in urban centers, contributing to the emergence of early labor movements. Worker demonstrations, wage protests, and strikes became more frequent, highlighting the gap between presidential policy and popular hardship. Van Buren, while sympathetic to the plights of workers, remained constrained by his philosophy of limited federal intervention. The presidency also contended with the lingering effects of the forced removal of Native Americans, a policy inherited from Jackson's era but still unfolding during Van Buren's tenure. The Trail of Tears, carrying thousands of Cherokee people from their ancestral lands to new territory west of the Mississippi, stained the conscience of the nation. Van Buren's administration continued the execution of federal mandates with little deviation, revealing the limits of his willingness to challenge established policy in the face of humanitarian catastrophe. Throughout these foreign and domestic challenges, Van Buren strove to balance competing interests, maintaining the Republic's stability while navigating the treacherous waters of popular discontent and international intrigue. His leadership during these crises, though not always transformative in its results, was marked by prudence, patience, and a methodical attention to process. Van Buren's capacity to manage foreign threats without resorting to war His restraint in matters that threatened sectional division, and his steadiness under ever-present domestic pressure speak to a presidency defined by careful stewardship. Though many of his decisions would invite criticism, both immediate and historical, they illustrated an adherence to principle amid the chaos of events, and a commitment to shaping the fate of the country through resolution rather than confrontation. Chapter 13. The Election of 1840, the Whig Uprising. The election of 1840 stands as a pivotal moment in the political fortunes of Martin van Buren. The nation, still unsettled by the enduring ramifications of the Panic of 1837, turned its eyes to the possibility of new leadership. Driven by the thunderous ascendancy of the Whig Party, Van Buren approached re-election with the gravitas befitting a sitting president, but his path was fraught with obstacles. The Whigs, energized by widespread dissatisfaction and the emergence of mass party politics, selected William Henry Harrison, a hero of frontier legend and military triumph. Harrison's candidacy came adorned with symbols of democracy and populism: the log cabin, hard cider, and a calculated disregard for the perceived elitism of Van Buren's administration. The campaign was unlike any before in American history. Whigs adopted strategies that mobilized voters through spectacle, parade, and song, aligning their cause with the mood of an anxious populace. Newspapers flourished with Whig propaganda, casting Van Buren as the architect of national misery and a man insulated from the plight of ordinary citizens. Van Buren, amid this rhetorical onslaught, struggled to articulate a vision that could resonate against the forceful simplicity of Tippecanoe and Tyler too. The careful explanations of economic policy, the defense of the independent treasury, and appeals to the democratic tradition could not match the emotional fervor stoked by the Whig campaign. His attempts to defend his presidency's record met with skepticism as voters sought direct answers to their most immediate economic concerns. Harrison's campaign capitalized upon the symbolism of common manhood, downplaying his own aristocratic origins in favor of a crafted narrative of humble heroism. In contrast, Van Buren was painted as aloof, aristocratic, and out of touch, despite his own upbringing in modest Kinderhook. The manipulation of image and perception marked a turning point in American electoral practice, signaling the rise of politics shaped by style as much as substance. The voting public responded in unprecedented numbers. Turnout soared, the machinery of partisan mobilization bringing legions of new voters into the polls. In cities and rural hamlets alike, the electoral contest was fought with intensity. Van Buren's efforts to salvage support through appeals to loyalty and reason could not withstand the tidal wave of Whig enthusiasm. The result was decisive. Harrison swept to victory, ushering in the first Whig administration and ending Van Buren's presidency. The 1840 election underscored the shifting currents of American political life, the emergence of popular mobilization as a preeminent force, and the susceptibility of leadership to the vagaries of economic fortune. Van Buren, gracious in defeat, reflected on the outcome with characteristic poise. The Whig triumph spotlighted the enduring truth that the presidency is as much about responding to national mood as it is about the exercise of policy. In the years that followed, Van Buren would continue to shape the course of American politics. But the memory of 1840 reminded him and the nation of the power of public sentiment and the changing face of democracy. Chapter 14, The Return to Kinderhook, Political Reflection. Defeat in the election of 1840 did not signal the end of Martin Van Buren's engagement with national affairs, but rather ushered in a period of introspective renewal. Returning to his beloved Kinderhook, the small New York village that had shaped his earliest ambitions, Van Buren found solace amid familiar landscapes and longtime friends. Yet his mind remained restless, turning over the lessons of leadership and the meaning of public service. Kinderhook, set among rolling fields and gentle streams, offered Van Buren respite from the relentless pace of Washington. Here, he immersed himself in correspondence, welcomed visitors, and contemplated the future of a nation he had once guided through storm and strife. His withdrawal from the spotlight was never total. Newspapers and political allies continued to seek his opinions, recognizing the enduring weight of his experience. Reflection came naturally to Van Buren, whose career had been marked by both triumph and adversity. He pondered the trials of his presidency, the economic crisis, the controversies of reform, the barriers to deeper unity. His writings reveal a man unwilling to wallow in regret, but eager to distill meaning from difficulty. The rural quietude of Kinderhook became a laboratory for ideas, a place where the former president's knowledge and wisdom might be put to new uses. Political visitors found Van Buren gracious and engaged, ready to debate the latest issues or counsel the next generation of Democratic leaders. He remained attuned to the shifting winds of public sentiment, anticipating new movements and striving to understand the sources of division. It was during this period that Van Buren began to reflect more deeply on the question of slavery, an issue that had haunted American politics, but which was now emerging as the central fault line in national life. His correspondence reveals a gradual, profound shift in perspective. Though he had once prioritized political pragmatism and unity, the growing insistence of abolitionists and the mounting violence over slavery's expansion spurred him to reconsider old alliances. Van Buren's return to Kinderhook was thus both a retreat and a renewal. It was a time for considering the meaning of legacy, not only his own, but that of the Republic itself. He faced his post-presidential years with a combination of humility, curiosity, and the unwillingness to be consigned to irrelevance. In this rural setting, Van Buren found clarity. He began to commit himself to the cause of restricting slavery's expansion, guided by a belief in the possibility of gradual progress and principled opposition. As the nation braced for its most tumultuous decades, Van Buren's reflections in Kinderhook laid the foundation for his emergence as a leader of new ideals. Chapter 15, The Free Soil Movement, a New Chapter in Ideals. In the aftermath of his presidency, Martin Van Buren's public life took an unanticipated turn. The rising tide of sectional conflict, coupled with the impassioned struggle between abolitionists and pro-slavery champions, called forth a new political identity. In 1848, Van Buren emerged as the presidential candidate of the Free Soil Party, a coalition dedicated to the prohibition of slavery's extension into the Western Territories. The origins of the Free Soil movement lay in the convergence of disparate groups: radical abolitionists, anti-slavery Democrats, and disaffected Whigs. Each found common ground in the conviction that the expansion of slavery threatened the moral and economic fabric of the nation. Van Buren, once a cautious moderate on the issue, now embraced a forward-looking stance. His candidacy signified both political innovation and personal evolution. Van Buren's platform staked out clear principles: opposition to the expansion of slavery, support for free soil, free labor, free men, and a commitment to preserving democratic institutions against the corrosive influence of sectional animosity. The movement resonated with Northerners troubled by the implications of the Mexican War, the acquisition of new Western lands, and the growing power of the slave-holding South. Campaigning as the Free Soil candidate, Van Buren traveled extensively, addressing audiences in states where the legacy of slavery intermingled uneasily with the promise of economic opportunity. His speeches, sharper and more fiery than in his earlier years, called for unity in the face of injustice and a reconsideration of national priorities. The rhetoric of compromise gave way to the urgency of reform. While the Free Soil Party stood little chance of electoral victory, its impact was substantial. Van Buren's candidacy drew significant support away from the Democrats, splitting the vote and aiding the election of Whig Zachary Taylor. More importantly, the movement galvanized public debate, lending momentum to the anti-slavery cause and emboldening a new generation of activists. Van Buren's commitment to the Free Soil movement reflected his evolving understanding of leadership. No longer centered on pragmatic alliances or the maintenance of sectional peace at all costs, he now embraced principle as the guiding light of politics. The struggle for free soil became for Van Buren a struggle for the soul of the nation. In the years that followed, the Free Soil movement would blossom into the foundation of the Republican Party, a force that would carry Abraham Lincoln to the presidency and decisively alter the trajectory of American history. Van Buren's chapter in this movement reminds us that the pursuit of justice often requires the courage to change and the willingness to stand apart from familiar company for the sake of higher ideals. Chapter 16, The Fight Against Slavery Expansion. In the antebellum period, the question of slavery's expansion westward was the burning crucible of American politics, a matter not only of economics and tradition, but of the very soul of the fledgling democracy. Martin Van Buren found himself in the midst of this conflict, forced to confront both the moral complexities and the political practicalities of a nation divided. Van Buren was no abolitionist. Indeed, his early career reflected the cautious pragmatism required of politicians from northern states seeking national appeal. Yet he was not blind to the evils inherent within the institution of slavery, nor insensible to the immense dangers posed by its extension into new territories. As president from 1837 to 1841, Van Buren inherited a country on the brink, a nation whose expansion risked intensifying sectional tensions, fomenting violence, and jeopardizing the fragile experiment of Republican governance. His stance emerged most pointedly in the context of Texas annexation. The Republic of Texas, having successfully seceded from Mexico, petitioned repeatedly for admission into the United States. At the heart of the debate lay the question: would Texas enter as a free state or a slave state? Van Buren's refusal to support annexation, based on his conviction that it would exacerbate the slavery debate and risk war with Mexico, was a defining moment of his presidency. Rather than seize short-term political advantage, Van Buren chose caution, a decision that cost him dearly among Southern Democrats, but established his reputation as a leader willing to sacrifice expediency for national stability. Even after leaving office, Van Buren's engagement with the slavery question did not diminish. In the pivotal presidential election of 1848, Van Buren aligned himself with the Free Soil Party, a coalition dedicated to halting slavery's expansion into new Western territories. Though he did not win, his campaign crystallized an important principle: that the containment of slavery, even if gradual, was essential to the survival of the Union and the realization of American ideals. Spearheading a movement with the slogan, "Free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men," Van Buren positioned himself as a moral force, championing compromise and the incremental progress of justice. Central to Van Buren's approach was his reliance on constitutional authority. He believed that Congress possessed the right and indeed the duty to regulate the status of territories. This belief placed him at odds with pro-slavery advocates who sought unchecked expansion, and at times with radical abolitionists who demanded immediate and total emancipation. Van Buren's strategy was one of containment and gradual reform, reflecting both the political limits of his era and a nuanced comprehension of American society's divisions. Yet, his leadership was not without its ambiguities. Critics accused him of political calculation, of attempting to upend Southern dominance while preserving Northern interests. Some questioned the depth of his commitment to anti-slavery principles, citing his earlier attempts to mute abolitionist petitions in Congress. These charges point to the difficulty of reconciling moral clarity with political necessity in a divided nation. Nevertheless, the outcome of Van Buren's anti-expansion efforts lingered beyond his time. The Free Soil movement grew into the Republican Party, ultimately leading to Abraham Lincoln's election and the decisive confrontation with slavery during the Civil War. Van Buren's acts, therefore, must be seen as laying the intellectual and logistical groundwork for the later, more radical movement for freedom. In sum, Martin Van Buren's fight against slavery expansion was characterized by measured, cautious courage. Balancing principle and pragmatism, he stood at the crossroads of history, neither an unyielding abolitionist nor a cynical accommodator. His legacy in this domain is one of incremental change, strategic foresight, and a deep, if sometimes understated, commitment to the ideals of liberty and union. Chapter 17, A Man of Principles, Standing Alone in Politics. Martin Van Buren's political life is a study in solitary leadership, a narrative marked not simply by alliance building, but often by courageous isolation in defense of principle. In an era defined by volatile constituencies and fierce party loyalties, Van Buren's willingness to stand alone set him apart from his contemporaries, framing his legacy as both exemplary and controversial. From the earliest days in the New York State Senate, Van Buren demonstrated an unswerving commitment to ethical governance. His advocacy for the Albany Regency was driven by a desire to professionalize political administration, introducing accountability and discipline where chaos had previously reigned. Van Buren believed that principled leadership required not only personal integrity but institutional reliability, a belief that would shape his every endeavor. His most iconic display of solitary principle emerged during his presidential campaign and subsequent tenure. The financial panic of 1837, which struck just months after his inauguration, posed an extraordinary test. While advisors and party leaders urged immediate government intervention to support failing banks, Van Buren held fast to his belief in limited federal power, resisting the temptations of demagoguery and quick fixes. He vetoed proposals for new government-backed banks, advocating instead for the independent treasury system, a radical, unpopular stance that further isolated him from both Whigs and Democrats. This independence came at a cost. Van Buren's adherence to doctrine rendered him vulnerable to criticism, undermining party unity and setting the stage for reproach from both North and South. Yet through adversity, he refused to compromise on core values: the sanctity of the Constitution, the neutrality of the government in financial affairs, and the necessity of legal constraint over populist excess. Perhaps more consequential was his role in shaping the Democratic Party's ideological backbone. Van Buren resisted attempts by factions to hijack the party's platform for sectional or economic gain. His lone campaign, Asa Free Soil Party candidate in 1848, epitomized this resolve. Facing certain defeat, Van Buren chose to break with the party he had helped build, prioritizing the principle of restricting slavery's growth over personal ambition. He stood, often alone, in the turbulent sea of public opinion, willing to risk his legacy in service to justice and union. Van Buren's solitary stands were not mere posturing. They were grounded in a deep comprehension of American politics, informed by both legal expertise and practical experience. He understood that true change often arises from dissent, and that principled opposition, however unpopular, serves as the crucible of democratic progress. His correspondence and diaries reveal a man troubled by the implications of power, skeptical of majority rule, unmediated by law or conscience. This skepticism conferred upon him an enduring independence, one that often alienated allies but preserved his integrity amid the era's political storms. The results of Van Buren's isolationism are mixed. He lost the support of Southern Democrats and ultimately his re-election bid. Yet he preserved the dignity of the presidency, the coherence of the party system, and the integrity of his own character. At a time when compromise was often synonymous with capitulation, Van Buren proved that leadership could thrive in the face of adversity, provided it was fueled by principle. Van Buren's place in American history thus rests not merely on what he accomplished, but how he accomplished it. He led by example, teaching generations of political actors the value of conscience over convenience, conviction over calculation. Though he may have walked alone, Martin Van Buren's legacy endures as a testament to the power of principled leadership. Chapter 18: The Elder Statesman. Influence Beyond Office. The conclusion of Martin Van Buren's presidency in 1841 did not mark the end of his contributions to American political life. Rather, it signaled the beginning of a new chapter, one in which his influence, though less visible, became no less decisive. As an elder statesman, Van Buren occupied a unique position in the nation's discourse, deploying both wisdom and restraint to guide, shape, and occasionally correct the course of American politics from outside the corridors of formal power. Van Buren's post-presidential life was marked by extraordinary engagement. Retiring to Lindenwold, his estate in Kinderhook, he remained intensely connected to the shifting tides of national debate. Through prolific correspondence with political allies and opponents alike, Van Buren offered counsel and sometimes sharp rebuke on issues ranging from economic policy to racial justice. His letters are today a rich vein for historians, illuminating the thoughts of a man deeply committed to the public good, even in private life. Chief among Van Buren's post-presidential projects was his continuing opposition to slavery's expansion. The Free Soil Campaign of 1848, while unsuccessful electorally, cemented his place as a moral voice in the wilderness, a statesman unafraid to challenge old friends and familiar structures when conscience demanded. Through speeches, editorials, and advocacy, Van Buren laid the groundwork for the later ascendancy of anti-slavery parties, passing the torch to figures such as Salmon P. Chase, William Seward, and ultimately Abraham Lincoln. Yet, Van Buren's elder statesmanship extended far beyond partisanship. He mentored younger politicians across the spectrum, advocating for the institutionalization of political parties as safeguards against chaos and demagoguery. His writing emphasized the importance of balance between federal and state authority, between majority will and minority rights. In an era often characterized by excess and incivility, Van Buren's measured tone served as a stabilizing force. His impact on the Democratic Party particularly endured. Though estranged from party orthodoxy during the Free Soil Campaign, he continued to fight for party unity around core principles rather than regional or economic self-interest. His warning against sectionalism proved prophetic as the nation lurched towards civil war. Alongside his public interventions, Van Buren's private reflections reveal a man preoccupied with legacy and precedent. He understood that his failures, most notably the inability to prevent the gradual fracture over slavery, were as instructive as his successes. In correspondence with European statesmen, Van Buren often compared American democracy's struggles to those of older nations, advocating humility and adaptation. The final decades of his life were marked by increasing veneration. Though eclipsed by more dramatic figures in public imagination, Van Buren's advice was often sought by presidents, governors, and party leaders grappling with the turbulent politics of the 1850s. He became, in effect, the living conscience of an era, a standard against which others measured their own conduct. Van Buren's role as elder statesman thus demonstrates the ongoing utility of experience and perspective in a young and evolving democracy. His counsel, modest yet influential, continues to resonate in discussions of American political development. If his presidency was characterized by principled isolation and innovation, his post-presidential life was marked by reflection, mentorship, and the subtle wielding of influence. In all endeavors, Van Buren remained true to the ideals of thoughtful governance, institutional stability, and moral progress, ensuring his prominence long after the seat of formal power had passed to others. Chapter 19. Legacy of Leadership, Foundations of the Modern Party System. Of all Martin Van Buren's lasting contributions to the American political landscape, none surpasses his role in the creation of the modern party system. Before Van Buren, national politics were dominated by personalities, factions, and loosely affiliated interest groups, subject to unpredictability and the frequent upheaval of coalitions. With Van Buren's vision, party politics became a coherent, disciplined structure, capable of mobilizing citizens, enacting policy, and stabilizing governance. Van Buren's innovations began long before his presidency. As a young lawyer and legislator, he recognized the importance of regularized procedures, hierarchical organization, and disciplined adherence to party platforms. The Albany Regency, his brainchild, was the first major political machine in American history, an apparatus designed to coordinate campaign strategies, reward loyal supporters, and punish defectors. Through the Regency, Van Buren demonstrated that order and discipline, rather than patronage and chaos, were the key to lasting political power. The lessons of the Regency were scaled up nationally during Van Buren's tenure as Jackson's vice president, and later as president himself. He advocated annual party conventions, organized national committees, and articulated the value of binding resolutions to prevent factionalism. In these innovations, he found new ways to harness popular energy, while constraining it within the limits of the democratic process. The effects were decisive. Political parties became vehicles for mass participation, opening American democracy to new classes of voters and facilitating the peaceful transfer of power. Van Buren argued that far from dividing the nation, parties served to channel conflict, moderate extremes, and foster compromise. His commitment to party discipline was not mere self-interest. It was grounded in a belief that only organized systems could provide the regularity and predictability required for stable governance. Van Buren's legacy also includes the elevation of public opinion as a governing force. Through party newspapers, mass campaigns, and structured rallies, he helped broaden the public sphere, transforming voters from passive observers into active participants. Though critics accused him of manipulating public sentiment, Van Buren believed that democratic engagement was essential to the health of the nation. Yet, the creation of the party system brought new challenges. Machine politics fostered corruption and sometimes stifled dissent. Van Buren struggled to balance the need for discipline with respect for principle, a tension that defines American party politics to this day. His own career illustrates the perils and possibilities of partisan loyalty. Building unity, he risked rigidity. Promoting stability, he sometimes suppressed diversity. Long after Van Buren's death, his innovations became the accepted norm. Parties organized at every level of government, formalized rules, governed nominations and elections, and mass politics became the main mechanism for democratic expression. The major party conventions, grassroots activism, and campaign apparatuses that characterize present-day politics all owe a debt to Van Buren's foresight. In sum, Martin Van Buren's legacy in party organization is foundational. He gave American democracy its enduring architecture, facilitating broader participation, orderly conflict resolution, and effective governance. For all its flaws, the modern party system remains a testament to Van Buren's genius, a system built not on fleeting charisma, but on durable institutions capable of sustaining the republic through turmoil and transformation. Chapter 20. The Kinderhook Fox Remembered, History's Verdict. Time has a way of both obscuring and illuminating the contributions of historical figures. Martin Van Buren, known during his life as the Kinderhook Fox for his cunning and resourcefulness, has endured a complex reception in the annals of American history. His legacy is woven through the fabric of the nation's political evolution, visible in its party structures, its debates over principle, and its struggles with sectional division. In contemporary memory, Van Buren is often overshadowed by the more dramatic figures who succeeded him. Yet historians have begun to reappraise his role, recognizing him as a central architect of American political development. His mastery of political organization, his principled leadership, and his nuanced response to the crisis of slavery stand out upon closer examination. Van Buren's presidency, marked by economic hardship rather than dramatic reform, was long regarded as a period of missed opportunities. The Panic of 1837 and subsequent depression dominated public perception, and Van Buren's refusal to yield principle for popularity cost him re-election. Yet through the lens of history, his refusal to intervene in the banking system has been hailed as a demonstration of constitutional restraint and financial prudence. In the era of modern debates over government intervention, his choices invite both criticism and praise. His legacy in the fight against slavery expansion has grown in significance, once obscured by the more radical actions of abolitionists and later civil rights leaders. Van Buren's gradualist approach now appears as a necessary bridge between the pragmatic politics of the early republic and the moral fervor of the Lincoln generation. By advancing incremental reform, he laid the groundwork for subsequent, more decisive action. Van Buren's contributions to party politics remain indisputable. His vision transformed American democracy from a fragmented landscape into a structured participatory system. Though the machine politics he introduced brought corruption and rigidity, they also fostered stability, inclusion, and accountability. Yet, Van Buren's personal reputation is a study in contrasts. Admired for his principle and intellect, he was equally distrusted for his cunning and tactical sophistication. The moniker Kinderhook Fox encapsulates both the skepticism and respect he inspired, a figure too cunning for blind veneration, yet too principled for dismissal. Today, the verdict of history judges Van Buren as a founder of modern American politics. His achievements in legal reform, party organization, and principled leadership endure, while his failures illuminate the perennial tensions of democracy between action and restraint, engagement and isolation, compromise and integrity. The Kinderhook Fox is remembered not as a mere partisan or technician, but as a complex statesman, at once practical and visionary, solitary and communal, flawed yet indispensable. As American politics continues to wrestle with the legacies of division and progress, Van Buren's life offers both caution and inspiration. His story reminds us that the pursuit of principle, however difficult, lies at the heart of leadership, and that the structures we inherit remain, in part, the work of his enduring hands. If you found this video helpful, inspiring, or entertaining, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on future content. Your support means the world. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.